Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have with me Jim Bouchard, and let me tell you just a little bit about him. He is a leadership activist, author, speaker, and founder of the Human-Centric Leadership Movement. His mission is to help leaders keep it human. So today we're going to talk about Inspire, Empower, the guide that is essential disciplines for leaders today. So please join me in welcoming my guest, Jim Bouchard. Jim, so excited. We're so aligned with what we believe. I think that when I was starting in the 70s and 80s into leadership, the leaders then were, how big is your hammer? How much can I scream at you, cut you down, and build you back up? Did not always got to that build you back up part. And I soon learned that leading with the heart, the head, and the hands is far more effective and taking advantage of both feminine and masculine energy. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. We always start out with two somewhat easy questions, sometimes challenging for people. First is, where do you live? Where do you call home right now?
I'm kind of at the opposite end of the weather spectrum today. We live in Maine, and as I said just before the program, the plow truck just pulled out. So we had a pretty good snowstorm last night, and it's looking really lovely out there. But like I said, I'm glad to send you some of the snow at this point.
No, thank you. Although my grandsons would love it. They've only seen snow like 3 times, so they would love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit.
That's why I like to travel to places like Georgia this time of year.
Yeah, and Florida and southern.
Yeah.
So I gave just a little bit of an introduction to really where you are today, but I always find it really helpful for the audience to understand what your journey was like. All of those twists, turns, pivots, change of paths that really led you to be doing what you do today and being so passionate about what it is that you do. So please share a little bit about your journey.
Well, the resume, the short one, I share it every week, is a 2-time college dropout and former drug addict. Aren't you glad you have me on the show now? Yeah, this started off in a whole different place, and I'm going to keep the story very short for us today. But eventually, martial arts was part of my way out of addiction. Okay, and I didn't realize it was going to turn into a career working with leaders. All this was a series of happy accidents, but over time, most of what I share with leaders, how to connect with people on a deeply human level, came from my experience with martial arts and as a sensei, helping people to get to black belt. And of course, my own transformation, if you want to say it, from a loser to a leader, right? From a drug addict to a black belt and later to sensei. And so, I used to think that was a pretty lousy resume for someone working in leadership, but I came to realize it was a pretty good one. And a big part of the reason is, and I know we're singing in harmony on this, a huge part of the leadership journey is about transformation, right? Whether we're talking about transforming ourselves, which the best leaders always do, right? Transforming our organizations, transforming people around us, and embracing this idea of change. Part of my mission is convincing people that change isn't something to be afraid of. It's right? But we seem to have a human aversion to it. And that's something I think we continually need to get over. That's nothing new. I mean, these ideas that we're sharing, I'd love to say I discovered or invented some of these things, and maybe each generation does for themselves, right? But these
Yeah.
ideas have been around a long, long time. I'd say, yeah, right now I go around saying the age of command and control is dead. I don't know if it was ever that effective. I mean, throughout
Yeah.
history, we find the best leaders were the people who were able to connect on a deep human level, right? And truly lived in
Exactly.
service, not the people that, like you said before, described as bringing the hammer down, command and
Hmm.
control.
Hmm.
Dictators have been effective at certain times, right? But the life of a dictator is, those guys must have sore necks because you're always looking over your shoulder to see who's going to take. Yeah.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah, it's interesting how I think I often talk about change, and it is scary, and you know probably a lot of those out in the audience remember that don't fix if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Mm,
But if you don't look at new and interesting opportunities, you never evolve, you never grow. I was a project manager for over 20 years,
yeah.
and I was always looking at process and where were gaps and where were opportunities. And yes, it may work at a certain point, but there you could be also much better.
Oh, yeah.
And it's always
Right.
worth, maybe it is the best process you have for right now, but as people changes, industry changes, technology changes, all of
Yeah.
a sudden what you did before isn't the best. And when you look at your people too, your people are needing different things. The young people are very,
Right.
very comfortable with technology. And so if you hand them a piece of paper to read, and they're like, well, where's the audio book for this? Kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
Well, you're opening up a lot of cans with a lot of worms in it, but thinking
So
about
let's talk
that.
about um,
Well,
many
just that
people.
idea of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, that's an
Hmm.
interesting thing. I think there's a lot of cliches that we probably ought to do away with at this point. And that one for sure. Again, if it were ever true, I mean, you could also say if it ain't broke, it's probably gonna be at some point.
Yeah,
Right?
sooner or later.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
our bodies, even, you have to
exactly,
constantly
exactly.
improve and exercise and move to
Yeah,
stay active and relevant.
right. No, we should always be looking. One of the greatest gifts my life as a martial artist taught me was this bit of philosophy that said, perfection's not a destination, it's a never-ending process, right?
Mm.
And if we're engaged in that process, the more we embrace that process, the better off we're going to be. So, no, we should never be satisfied with where we are. I mean, we can be happy, right? But satisfied's a different thing. And I don't mean in the sense of accumulation either. People confuse that sometimes, right? It
Right.
might be. I'm not judging. I mean, material accumulation can be very important to some people. That's cool, whatever drives you, right? But the important thing is, like you said, if it ain't broke now, let's look for ways to constantly improve things. If for no other reason, then you're right. People around us and conditions might change. So, while a process might appear intact right now, it might not be appropriate or effective going
Yeah.
forward, right? And that's something I think we have to consider. Even though it might be working, it might not be the best in this time and in this place. And that's something I think a lot of leaders are really waking up to now with the pace, the accelerated pace of advancement that we're experiencing, particularly with technology right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have to make sure that we've got our eyes on the horizon. Otherwise, things are just going to pass us. Now, sometimes
Yeah.
people argue with me though. They say, "Well, everything's fine now." I say, "Yeah, well, it might be." I said, "But it takes sometimes it takes a long time for an organization or even a leader to fail. That might take generations. Things might
Yeah.
be okay for a long time." But is that what you're satisfied with? Or do you want to build something strong and lasting that's going to serve people for generations? That's a question I think each leader should ask for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
No right or wrong, again, but you have to ask that question.
And really, if it's right for now and you don't have an eye on the pulse,
Mm,
then it's harder to turn that ship later on.
right? Right? No, you find yourself way behind, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And the other thing is that, we're talking about inspire and empower.
Hmm.
And when you're looking at change, you really need to communicate why you're doing the change, how it impacts, and it's constant, and it's a lot of work for leaders. And sometimes, you'll pass it off to your marketing people or whomever to make the message. But as a leader, sometimes it really needs to come from you to
Oh,
show
yeah.
that you understand, that you hear the people and their concerns and you're addressing them.
Yeah, or at least you're curating that, right? It can come collectively. That idea, that vision can happen organically, it can happen collectively. But it's your responsibility to curate that and articulate it in a way that touches people's hearts, not just their heads, right? That's what we mean by
Exactly.
inspire. I hope you get the impression by now. I try to be measured on these programs, but I'm not a lollipops and puppy dogs guy. This stuff is real. This is roll up your sleeves, bare knuckle stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about the words inspire, empower, guide, these aren't just pretty words. We look at them as the most essential disciplines that a leader needs to embrace. And they're hard work. And by discipline,
Yeah.
I mean meaningful, purposeful habits, not just check-offs on the to-do list, right? These are practices that we need to identify. That's what we spend most of our time in workshops doing, right? Identifying these. Let's look at inspire, because that's probably the most difficult one. How do we touch people's hearts genuinely? Get past the cognitive
Authentically,
thinking,
yeah.
right? And they don't always have to be grand things. In fact, usually they're not.
Yeah.
I'd argue that your own example is probably the most inspirational thing you can do. But it's hard work, and it means commitment in time. It's not always the most efficient use of your time, right? But that's what we need to do. And once we identify these things, how do we embed them in these practices? And then how can we share them? And and that's how they become embedded in the culture eventually. So yeah,
And if you think
this is tough work.
if you think about it too, this is something that is from consistency, persistency, perseverance, and
Right.
it's not going to show on the bottom line
It's harder. Yeah,
right away, right? And that's
right.
hard for some, for upper level folks to accept. They want right, let me see the dollars for this time.
Yeah,
But it isn't always going to be there. You have to really build relationships, and that doesn't always contribute or uh, change into dollars and cents right away, but it will
right.
eventually.
Not right away. What's interesting though, too, we could also argue that, because sometimes people challenge me. They say, are you doing research to back this up? I said, for God's sake, we're drowning in research. We're drowning in data. The data's been there I'd argue, in formal leadership, academic leadership study, it's been around at least since that's been around, which we could argue started somewhere around the 1930s, 1940s, right? When colleges and business colleges and universities started to pay more attention to this as a process. And certainly the big boom in the 50s and 60s when it became a science, if you will, right? That word. And so the data is out there. I mean, we're swimming in it. And it does translate to your bottom line. Now, sometimes it's easier to measure it, though, in the negative, right? What happens if you're not doing these things? What happens if you're not connecting with people? What happens if you're not providing an environment where, well, the argument I'll make is I said people perform at their best when, and only when, they know their leaders care, their work has meaning, and they have the chance to learn, grow, and develop.
Absolutely.
Pick up, I think it's the November, December issue of Harvard Business Review. And somebody just spent a lot of money doing a study to say that again, and that's fine. And believe me, I wish I had made that up. I mean, those were my words, but that's from learning about it, from trying to help people achieve things they didn't think possible. But also, I mean, this wisdom is thousands of years old. It's floating around us all the time. So, to be able to access that, and more important though, to put it into practice. Like I said, I love to talk about it. We can have a glass of wine and talk philosophy all night. I'm fine with that. But really, we have to put it to work. We have to say, how can we make this real? And that's where it becomes, there's no shying away from the words. It becomes hard work. And I think the more we embrace that hard work, the more joy we can find in it. I mean, why are people afraid of hard work? I mean, that's where everything happens. It's where we experience our greatest sense of accomplishment, right? Our greatest sense of joy when we face something that's tough and we do it. And
It's exciting, and
it is.
and I think a lot of times it brings a lot more collaboration if you
Yeah.
do it right. You don't be that person that wants to be the hero, the superstar. I think working together to solve those new undiscovered things is really where you find a lot more about your team, but also it gives different perspective to maybe make a better idea than you thought on your own.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the challenges now. In fact, we're putting together a session called the hybrid hustle, where we're trying to tackle, or well, I shouldn't say tackle because I'm not really an answers person. We in our workshops and our sessions online, where it's online or live, it cause a lot more trouble than we do, I think, provide answers. But that's the point, right? To stir up the pot a little bit. Let's look at these
Yeah.
tough questions and let's start to figure out how can we start to address these things, right? And I don't believe with any of these issues there's one solution. Very seldom is it. Well,
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Thomas Sowell said there are no solutions anyway. They're only trade-offs, right? I think that's a good way to look at it. It's a
Yeah.
dynamic process. But at any rate, the remote work, we've been going back and forth to that. What's right? Is it right to people to work? Well, sometimes, yes, I suppose at times we all need to, hunker in somewhere and do work on our own. Also, we've seen, though, this is one that we kind of were suspicious of early because I thought, well, for certain very task-heavy occupations, things that are very functional, things that can be checked off. Yeah, I can see where remote work would be beneficial. But what's going to happen to innovation? What's going to happen to creativity? And I think it was University of Essex in England, along with the University of Chicago, just released a very interesting report. Yeah, they're seeing a downturn in innovation and creativity. And they actually said, I was hoping they would actually use this term too. They said part of the reason that they figured this out is because there's no water cooler interaction, is exactly the term that they used. This informal interchange that we have day to day when we pass each other in the hall or sit together in the cafeteria. And if nothing else, your presence, your smile that might encourage somebody that day, right? Right? Pull somebody back from the brink or encourage somebody to take a chance on an idea that they may have been shy about. All these things, all these interactions that we have on a day-to-day basis can be lost with remote work. So does that mean I'm condemning it? No. All right. I think we have to find a balance. And I think that another great gift from martial arts life, balance is not a dynamic state. It's not a static state. It's a dynamic process, right?
Right.
That's what that Tai Chi symbol is in part means, right? It's always moving. We're always in a state of flux. The idea is that we're kind of continually working towards some idea of balance, recognizing and accepting that now we're not going to be there very long. That's a transient state. And then we're going to look for the next one. So it's that process of kind of bringing things back to the middle that's really exciting. And stop looking for answers. I mean, people that have all the answers, we have a name for that person. It's not usually leader. It usually starts with an A and ends with an E. You know what I'm saying? People in the middle.
Yeah, I know
That's
that
someone,
term real
right?
well.
The best leaders are not people with all the answers. The best leaders, greatest leaders that I've ever met and interacted with and learned from are the people who have committed themselves to the process of formulating good questions, right? Continually.
Yeah.
And then allowing those questions to guide them, wherever they're going to go. So,
And I think, what I saw, because as a project manager, I had teams all around the world, and from time to time, we would bring everybody together to just build and to
right.
just get to know each other. But I did a contract after I retired and was brought back and wasn't the boss anymore, wasn't the person making the decisions. And so my team were all over the place, but my leaders were in New Jersey. And I didn't have that moment where let's just chat to see how things are going. Let's have our water cooler Zoom call. And I think, that's more work for people, but it was always every meeting had to be for a purpose. And the purpose never was just to see how you doing,
Yeah.
everything okay, got any new ideas or just how's your family kind of thing. It was always all these things. And so the team never really gelled, in my opinion. And I think that's what leaders have to remember is if you are going to have remote workers, you have to make them feel heard and seen, even though they're, on the other side of the world, maybe.
Yeah, especially, almost anything works when things are going good, right?
Yeah.
Winning solves everything. It's when there's a real challenge. And again, we saw this during COVID where, we were forced to work apart, a lot of us, right? And, to see the response when people started coming back to conferences and to see the hugs and the tears and, people just wanting just to be together again, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to recognize the power in that. And you're absolutely right. A lot of this has to do with informal, well, what a lot of people would put in the informal bucket. I wouldn't. I think it's one of the most powerful things.
Yes.
Our ability to relate to each other as human beings. Because again, when things get tough, right, we want the people around us that are going to stick with us, support us, all right? Again, it's easy when things are good. And those people will only stick with us when we've developed authentic relationships with them.
Yeah.
As leaders, when we've earned people's trust, their respect, and their loyalty, right? And until and unless we do that, then command and control won't work anyway. You're not going to follow the orders from somebody who you don't respect and you don't trust. And I learned that as a young man, as a firefighter, believe it or not. Right? There were people that barked orders who people we would literally run into a burning building for without question. And then there are other people where we would hesitate, say, I don't know. This guy, this guy he didn't put me first before. I don't think he's doing it now. Right? And that hesitancy, in that situation, that can be life and death.
Yeah,
but metaphorically, it can be the same thing in business, right?
There were a couple things, kind of combining two of my questions, talking about charisma. And you say not everyone is charismatic, but they can inspire others.
Oh,
so
yes,
talk about that.
No,
and the
absolutely.
other piece.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to interrupt this. You just hit right to the heart. That's absolutely at the core of everything we're talking about. Inspiration shouldn't be something grand. It should be commonplace. Charisma is way overplayed, way overplayed. And I'll make the argument that everyone is a leader, whether they realize it or not, because everyone does these things to some extent. You inspire, you touch people's hearts, right? You empower people. You give people the tools they need. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's not so much, but you do that. And you guide people. You're with people face to face, and you share your wisdom and your knowledge and your experience, even sometimes accidentally. All right.
Yeah.
The leader is someone who's going to consciously embrace these processes, right? And work on them and develop them to a high degree so that then we can bring a lot of people together. We can get them moving in the same direction. We can, I don't know, it sounds kind of cliched to say this, but to transform me into we, right?
Right, exactly. And when I was younger, I always thought, well, it's just I have this mom gene, and I always want to be helping others, teaching others, building them up, And then I later realized that really was a leader gene. And and so, I think I always go back to the golden rule. What would I do? What would God do? Do unto others as you want done to you. And so I always think about that as I'm asking of others and things is, well, how would I want to be spoken to? How would I want to be treated? What would inspire me? And try to pass that on to those that I lead.
Yeah. And it's so cool because when people ask me who my greatest influences are, my mom was one of them. And she was one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. She didn't finish high school. She had to quit work when she was young because her dad passed away. Back in those days, that's what people did, right? But you'd never know it. You'd think she graduated from Yale or something. I mean, she was so well self-educated. Her mom was the same way. And just brilliant people. Mom, de facto, a good mother is a leader, right? I think sometimes, and it's important and it's fun, and I think educational sometimes to go to the semantics of this issue, right? And how do we apply these words? Leader, for example, what is leader exactly? I'll argue that leadership has nothing to do with rank or title or a position of authority. It has to do with all the things we're talking about. Now, there are places where rank and title and a position of authority become important, right? In a business hierarchy or whatever. Somebody's got to make decisions and so forth. That's fine. Now, we'll call that person a manager, right? Admiral Grace Hopper said, how'd she say it? Management is about things, leadership is about people,
Yeah.
right? So they're both important. They're crucial to our survival. But wouldn't it be nice if all people in a position of authority also embrace the ideas of leadership that you and I share?
Yeah.
That's what makes a business a better place to work. That's what makes a community a better place to live in, a family a better place to live in, right? So that's what's fundamental to these. I think too often people just throw the word leader around. They may as well substitute position of authority for that word, right? And that's not always the case. I mean, not all effective managers are good leaders. It'd be nice if they were, right?
I was just gonna talk about that with you a little bit. And, you know, when we as leaders are looking to expand our leadership, and so we promote people sometimes because they're good at some technical skill, operational skill, but we don't, when we interview them for those positions, we don't always ask the questions about values and core and how they interact with people and feel about people. You know, there are some terrible managers out there because they don't think about the people, and the people are they're your most valuable asset.
Oh, right. And in some positions, it would be a detriment to that person's technical performance to be thinking too much about people around them. You know, we see this specifically in sales sometimes. Now, I'd argue still you can perform better if you embrace the ideas we're talking about. Okay. You may have achieved success without it, but I think you'd be better off if you did. I think more organizations are coming onto this too. More important than interviewing that candidate is interviewing the people around them.
Yeah.
Right? How does this person
How do they
help out?
feel?
Yeah. Do they uplift the other members of the team? Is this something that they've been doing on their own? Now, that leads us to the age-old question, though, and I still get people that argue this when I'm presenting. They say, well, you really can't train leaders. You can't build leaders. And I said, oh, yes, you can.
Yeah, you can.
I said, first of all, we're all capable of it. Now, are we all going to be great leaders, whatever that means? I don't know. A lot of that's opportunistic too, right? I think some of the people that we look at as great leaders, well, they were in the right place at the right time. You know, how many people, I think of one because the holiday just passed, Martin Luther King. When you read Martin Luther King, you're from Georgia, you know that one of the places I love to visit in Georgia is the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta. And there's so much to learn there. There's so many materials we can learn from there. But he did not see, his whole ambition was to preach in front of a congregation, in front of a relatively small church. Yeah. He didn't sit down and decide he was going to be a global leader for humanity. Right. That wasn't on the radar for him, right? You see, so, you know, but the opportunity presented himself, the challenge was there, and rather than running from it, he embraced it, and somewhat reluctantly at times. I mean, he knew his life was in danger a lot of times through all that. That's not an easy position to be in, but he had the courage to keep going. So that's the example of it. We're all capable of that. At the very least, we're all capable of being better leaders. We can all learn to inspire the people around us on a little deeper level. We can all learn to identify what people need, which is what we're talking about with empowerment. And sometimes it's very surprising. I mean, I'm sure you do this in your work too, but when we workshop that empowerment section, I mean, we can spend a couple of hours just creating the list. And sometimes the items on that list are pretty surprising. They're not things that people might have thought of. And then the guiding thing, which to bring that to earth, let's call it mentoring, right?
Yeah.
We're all capable of doing that. We're all capable of doing that better. All right. So these are all things we can learn and do better. Being great, I don't know. I mean, who are you measuring yourself against? In martial arts, we learned a long time ago, that martial arts is a very humbling experience. I get in trouble a lot. In fact, one of my masters used to say this: never measure yourself against other people. You'll always find someone better and someone worse.
Of course.
Right? When you measure yourself against the performance that you put forward yesterday, that's a pretty good place to start, right? Can I be better today than I was yesterday? Can I be better tomorrow than I am today? And sometimes those are really small steps, and you don't always feel them, right? You always feel it the day you tie on your new rank, you get your new belt, right? But that wasn't, that isn't really the moment.
No.
It's all the work that went into that, right? That we're feeling on that day, that we've created a symbol so that we will feel it and that we can make it more tangible, that we can
Yeah.
embrace that moment, right? But really the work was done over a long period of time, right?
And that really takes us all the way back to what we started talking about is change and
Yeah.
embracing change and understanding that it is the small things and you might not see that change for a while, but it is
Oh
each of those
no.
small steps.
A lot of times it feels like you're going backwards, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You see, it's like scrabbling up a gravel hill, right? One step forward, three steps back, and you keep churning. Eventually, you start making headway. I mean, that's real life. And believe me, I'm not preaching from the mountain. I'm preaching from the gully. There's times when I have my moments too,
Yeah.
but I've disciplined myself in those moments to say, how my mom used to say it, "This too shall pass." It was one of her
Yeah.
big sayings that she always, "This too shall pass." So whatever misery we were experiencing, that was how she kind of guided us out of it.
Yeah. And I think that uh, it's just, how do you know that if you fall down that you get yourself back up?
Ooh,
It's
you're a martial
easy.
artist. That's right. That's one of our old sayings. Knock down 7 times, get up 8. I knew you were a black
Hmm.
belt somewhere.
My grandson, the oldest, who's
Yeah.
9 now, did martial arts, and so I didn't appreciate what he was getting. At first, whenever he got into it, I thought, oh, he's just taking out his aggression or something.
Yeah.
But as I listened, as sat, while he was going through it, I said, this is teaching him respect. This is teaching him patience.
Yeah.
This is teaching him integrity. This is building his true self. And
No,
I got to
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's funny because not that the kicking and punching part isn't fun and
Isn't fun.
important. Yeah. But there's, it's interesting. Of course, you have to be with the right teacher, right?
Hmm.
But I think the mythology of martial arts gets a little too much light, you know. The movie stuff gets a little too much light. Frankly, and sometimes my peers get mad when I say this, but anybody can learn how to fight. I mean, just like we're talking about with leadership, anybody can learn how to fight. It's just hard work. Getting to black belt's simple. Practice. You'll get there if
Hmm.
you hang in there. Is it a skill any different? Does it make you superhuman? No. In fact, most of the time, if it's done properly, this is, people ask, why don't martial artists get in more fights? Well, because we know how badly we can get hurt,
That's
for one thing,
right.
right? When you study that sincerely, when you study that genuinely, yeah, it's very humbling. I mean, when two people, I only know two truths after, spending most of my life studying martial arts. Here's the only two things I know to be true. Two people fight, someone's getting hurt, probably both people.
Yeah.
Everything else is up in the air. So you got to get past the mythology. One of my masters I admired so much, Professor Nick Serio, who if you met on the street, you would think he was a pizza cook from Rhode Island, which he might have, I think he did own a pizza restaurant at one time. But small guy, stocky, small guy, big hands, and just a little, a little rough around the edges. I love this guy. That's, as I can imagine, I identified with that, right? So
Hmm.
at any rate, he used to tell us that the attainment of a black belt was nothing more than the attainment of a good learning attitude. And he said, most of all, you learn about yourself. He said, now you've learned how to learn about yourself, and now go do something useful with it. Because he was one of these people who, professed to us that what we were learning in the dojo was to be taken beyond the dojo walls, right? What good was it if we're just using it to
Yeah.
smack each other around on a Thursday night, right? Yeah.
Well, that takes you back to that mentoring and I think, that's why I know I do this is I saw such a need for mentoring that wasn't happening in the corporate. It's training is one of the first things that gets
Yeah.
kicked out and I always tell people if anybody can be a mentor, if you started one day before that person, you could be their mentor because you know one day
Exactly.
more than they do. But
Hmm.
it's really just sharing of your ideas and your knowledge and not necessarily a coach or a trainer, but it's really just
Yeah.
having somebody that can help hold other people accountable, and also to give someone a sounding board to just think about different things and sound off.
Or even just a different perspective, right? It might not even
Yeah.
be more experience. I remember one time, this was a good experience I think people can take to apply to mentoring no matter where you're doing it. I was one of my most treasured teachers, Dr. Yang Ming. I was attending one of his seminars, and he was teaching us a long form, these dances that we do, right? And my habit when I'm learning something like that is to look down. Like a lot of people, we look down, trying to get rid of distractions, right? Of course, I would tell my students not to look down. I'd say, look around because this is what you're supposed to be doing. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, there was this person, I had been doing martial arts, I don't know, probably 20 years at that time. And this woman in the seminar with me, it was lunchtime, so some of us were just hanging around practicing. And she noticed me looking down. I knew from earlier on that that was her very first day in martial arts. That was her very first day in this seminar, right? And she came over to me, well-meaning. She said, you should look up when you're practicing. And my first instinct was just to get mad, right? Who's this person? Who the
Yeah,
hell is
one
she?
day,
Tell me
one
what to
day.
right, one day. And then thankfully I thought about it. And I shared that story with Dr. Young a couple of years after that. It was interesting. I said, she was right. She was absolutely right. Why can't I learn from this person? The important thing is that she was right. She had a different perspective, right? And she was sharing something with me that could have been quite useful. I still looked down when I was practicing. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, time has flown by, and you shared so many great words of wisdom and past experiences. And so, if anyone out there wants to get in touch with you, as always, I have a slide that has your contact information. Everybody that's just listening, they should have been taking notes all along. But if they didn't, everything will be on my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling. So please subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com website in the show notes. So the information for the website is thehumancentricleader.org. Again, that's thehumancentricleader.org. For Facebook, you can just search for Jim's name, and that's Bouchard. He has a group out there you can join. LinkedIn and YouTube, both search his name, Jim Bouchard. YouTube, put @ in front of that. In eSpeakers, you can just search for his name as well. I'm going to turn it over to Jim. He's going to talk about his call to action for today.
Well, first of all, I'm going to be a little audacious and I'm going to say, let's make sure this isn't the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning, right? There's so much we can learn from each other, and we'd love to have you on Keep It Human Network too, and share your ideas. With some of our folks. This leadership is sharing, leader shares. That's what we need to be doing. So, at any rate, the new network is actually up and going. It's a dream I've had for years to bring people together so we can have these conversations with people all over the world, share these ideas, and share other good resources. So it's keepithuman.network, keepithuman.network. And if you go there, there's a place where you can join the network. There's a free level that'll always be free. Then there's some deeper levels if you'd like to get involved. Awesome. And there you can download right on that page. You'll be able to download Inspire Empower Guide, IEG. That's the book that Vicki was talking about. My other books and stuff will be accessible there too, but that's the one that's downloadable, and you can get it for free.
Awesome. Jim, thanks for taking the time for having a great conversation today. I enjoyed so much sharing, hearing your stories that you shared, and just really being inspired to continue doing what we're doing.
Oh, thank you, Vicki, for your hospitality. And like I said, let's keep the conversation going. And I got to tell you, you made me feel a little bit warmer today, knowing you're down there in sunny Georgia.
That's right, 58 degrees.
Ooh, I'm jealous. I'd be in the pool.
As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.